Leadership Story Talks, where we discuss the practices that engage, motivate, develop, retain, and attract people to businesses. We'll give you principles and tools based on real-world stories to leverage listening and storytelling to become a better leader and management professional. Leadership Story Talks is produced by Narrative, a company that focuses on personal storytelling for business.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. In this podcast, Julianne Ryan and I, Jerome and Julienne, discuss ways in which we can create more engagement in our lives, and especially at work. There are more people today who identify as disengaged at work than there are who say they feel engaged. So we come from Narrative, which is a company that focuses on engaging businesses and their audiences through the power of listening and storytelling, and we have a 7-step method to do so. So that's a little bit about us and about what this podcast is about. And we always bring in guests who have different perspectives and can sort of complement the things that Julianne and I talk about. And today we have such a guest, and I'm really happy about it. Her name is Juliana Tafur. She's an Emmy-nominated TV producer and the creator of the Listen Courageously movement and workshop series. Her award-winning documentary, Listen, brings together Americans with opposing viewpoints, and her Listen Courageously workshops facilitate opportunities for people to connect across differences. As TV producer and filmmaker with experience as production executive for Discovery across 100 hours of content, and as series producer for Nat Geo and others, Juliana is committed to advancing projects and creating immersive spaces that foster human connection. This work led to a TEDx talk, Listening Courageously Can Bridge What Divides Us, which we highly recommend, to her selection into the prestigious Obama Scholars Program, and to a mention by President Obama, naming her as a rising leader in the space of bridging differences. Her latest contributions as senior producer include Doha Debates with Mo Amer and Red Table Talk, The Estefans, recently nominated for a Daytime Emmy Award. So Juliana, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Wow, you delve deep there in the
I know, I just went for it. You know, I didn't have the heart to cut anything out because it's all relevant. And I know the first time that we met, you know, you literally mentioned all of these things, and it was part of our background conversation, and there was such a connection with what we do at Narrative, and the fact that you particularly emphasize listening as a way of bridging differences. I felt like all of this was important to say. Having said all of that, that's a bio, and I was the one who was reading it. So I'd love for maybe to kick us off, for you to say what has kind of led you from, you know, TV producer to and filmmaker to now founder of this organization, Listen Courageously. How did that sort of come about? Was that a sort of natural progression, or was there a point when you decided, I'm going to do something else with this film rather than, you know, continuing to do what you were doing in the production world?
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for all that. So I don't think it's like from A to Z. This has been the progression. I think it is all ongoing, and I think that's the beauty of it as well. So it's not a journey from TV producer to Listen Courageously creator in a straight line. All of those identities are kind of there together and bubbling at the same time. And whenever I find and I am found to do a project that is connected to the mission, I'm happy to jump on it and kind of get the creative juices flowing and going. And whenever that resides and I am given the opportunity to go back to Listen Courageously workshops and devote all of my time to it, I am really eager to jump back into it. So it's kind of like the ebb and flow of doing two things that are so aligned, as long as the work all has the same mission and the same purpose, and as long as I am serving it. So Listen, though, did spark something in me in which I didn't want to go the traditional route of placing it at a network and just having that be the end all for the film. I discovered along the way that the film really had this greater purpose of serving as a tool for inspiring conversation, for inspiring better dialogue, and for inviting people to listen in a different way.
Mm.
And that led to Listen Courageously. And that led to also an internal assessment of what would be the success of the film. Is the film successful if it ends up in Amazon, Roku, and Peacock because we had offers to place it there? Or will the film be successful if it's actually being used as a tool to truly work with people so they recognize their listening blocks and are able to engage with others in difficult conversations? So I had to do like a little bit of an ego check as well and understand that the film had this different purpose and to go and flow with it. And that's when Listen Courageously was born. So we use the film as a tool in workshop settings with universities and organizations and corporations to get people to open up and recognize that perhaps they thought they were good listeners, but maybe they can do a little bit better. And what have they noticed when the film participants across the difficult topics of abortion, guns, and immigration are able to stop and listen? What can they see as people recognize and see each other through listening, right? So it just became this really powerful tool for them to come kind of hearts open, souls open, and to dig deeper in themselves. And I'm really grateful for the journey that Listen Courageously has started, which, you know, we're going to be going deeply into today. So thank you for the space.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wonder, so maybe going back, what was sort of the genesis of the film itself? Can you tell us a little bit about what the film is about? I mean, you alluded to the topics that it covers and what it's spawned in terms of conversations and bridging differences between people. But yeah, if you could maybe take us a little bit back in time to what led you to actually make this film.
Yeah, so the film truly was born after the US election in 2016. And at the time I was working for Discovery Networks, and I was really deeply troubled by what we were seeing in the media, in social media, just what was felt in that moment in time that was so jarring and so different from anything we had witnessed of people just being really uncomfortable with people who looked different, people who were different, people who expressed themselves different. And as a Colombian American, for the first time ever, I felt like, do I belong in this place? This is so weird. I've never felt ever like I didn't belong. And it was definitely going around in some of the circles of friends and of people who I worked with and people who I frequented. And I wanted to do something about it because I quickly noticed that othering simply leads to more othering, right? As I was feeling othered and different, I began to say, no, they are different. Who are these people, right? I don't understand them. I am fearful of them. And I wasn't pleased with kind of the emotional burden that was placing on me. And what I was kind of harvesting deep inside, you know, it wasn't positive. It was resentful. It was, fearful. So I wanted to do something about it. And I said, you know, how is it that we are going to bring these people together? Maybe it's through conversation. Maybe it's through this intentional pairing of people who are polar opposites on the toughest issues of our time. So I chose abortion, guns, and immigration. And with this belief that at the end of the day, they were going to be able to come together. So as I was struggling to understand what was happening and trying to also come to terms with people who were different from me, I had this deep, deep belief that we were going to be able to see people for who they were, that we were going to be able to tap into a humanity that was shared, that would be able to transcend the difference, the perceived difference. And I had a hard time explaining this to people Like I had conversations initially with networks about it. And they were like, how is it that you're going to do this? And I said, trust me, I'm going to do this. But the trust me, I'm going to do this wasn't enough. And there were kind of attempts to, oh, let's make it more this, let's make it more that, let's make it more about the disagreement because we need those ratings. And I said, well, that's not the way I'm going to go. I'm not going to create more division and polarization. I'm seeking for exactly the opposite. So I decided to go the independent route, and thankfully was able to get an angel investor back it up. And that's how Listen was born. And I was able to run a social experiment and record it. And I'm glad I did, because I learned so much along the way in watching these encounters and in understanding that those who were able to come together and truly see heart to heart were those who listened. So then that sent me on a journey to understand listening better and to understand so much the complexity of the human mind, right? And why is it that we do not see eye to eye, heart to heart? It's truly because of ego. It's because of this concept of who we are that is so imposed and ingrained in us that doesn't allow us to connect empathetically with another being. So we can dig so much deeper into kind of this ego-driven concept that I've began to also unravel and share in the workshops as a means by which people can actually put ego to the side and engage in a different way with others.
I'm very curious because when I was reading this, and I'm always listening to how news commentary has changed over the years, where it's now okay for people to talk over each other. I remember my godson went to Canada university about 15 years ago, and I said, pay attention to the news. They actually let each other finish their sentences, like just turn on the TV just for the pure act of witnessing that. But I'm curious about your process and like how it involved and how you enabled people to create a space for people to test their listening skills. How did that work for you?
Yeah.
Was it try and try again, or do-overs, as we say in New York, about the process?
Thank you. Yeah, I devised kind of a three-step process that initially invited people to only talk about the issues like we see in the news. Then we moved past that and invited people to only talk about the personal backstory that had led to the belief in the issue. And we mediated that through an art exercise. So in essence, like art therapy. They were expressing through art what led them to believe so strongly about what they believed. And then turned their art around, shared it with each other, and through that broke the ice and got into deeper dialogue. And then the final encounter involved an opportunity for them to share anything else that hadn't been shared, as well as letter writing. So it allowed them the opportunity to express to the other person what they could appreciate, what they had learned about them, what was new, novel that they hadn't seen before. And it was in two of the three cases, like a beautiful coming together and acknowledgement of the other person's humanity. And oftentimes before the letter writing, what I was able to identify and recognize and see in the film participants was that just the acknowledgement, typically from one part. So one person, right? It takes one person to initiate true good listening, and then clearly two to engage in it. But all it takes is one person's recognition of the other person's struggle, suffering, difficulty, humanity, value, for the other person to go, you see me, you truly see me, you get me. And then the magic happens. That's all people want. People just want to be seen.
So seen and heard.
Yeah, exactly.
The secret from.
You listen first. After you listen, you're able to see. And when you truly see, the magic happens. It's like the magic sparks. Because all we want as humans is to be seen. But we are only seen if we are truly listened to. So it's just fantastic to see what happens when a wall goes down through the pure and simple act of listening. And then how that just creates this chain effect where the other person is also receptive to sharing in a different way, to understanding in a different way, to seeing the value of the other in a different way. So in order to initiate good listening, you first have to model listening.
Yeah.
And if you want to be listened to, you first have to listen to whoever is your quote unquote opponent. And there are rules of engagement as well, right? You're not just going to listen to anyone and harm yourself along the way. So what we say is, as long as someone's opposing belief is not denying your existence, and if respect is present, you can listen courageously.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But clearly, if those things are not present, then why engage?
Right.
So it's also that recognition of, we have to be wise on who we engage with, and there are times to engage and times to disengage, and that's okay.
Yeah, making sure that there's an agreement in place, whether, and I'm assuming in the spaces that you create, that's made pretty explicit, that people agree to be in that space and to listen in that moment.
Yeah, but if the person is not capable of it and wants to retrieve, they surely can.
They can, yeah.
And that's what happened with one of the film participants. And we left it intentionally because I wanted to show how this is hard work, and it takes intentionality. It takes desire. And we've been able to also outline and now that we have the film as a tool and walk people on how to do this in workshops, what we say is, as long as you can be fully present, right? There needs to be that full present, that desire to truly want to be there and for the right reasons, right? And this genuine curiosity that you want to truly learn about the other person. You are seeking to understand, why is it that they believe what they believe? And then you're entering these spaces without ego. You are truly putting your ego to the side and saying, bye-bye to it, just for a moment. I am not here to win this conversation. I am here to be with this person. And then judgment, right? As the person is speaking, as the person is sharing, you're not, passing judgment on who they are, what they must have done, who they relate with, how they think about you and the people like you. Like you got to put that to the side, or else you simply cannot engage. So those conditions have to be present, we believe, for like a true listen courageously interaction to be able to happen. But then you must make sure that respect is present and that the other person truly recognizes you and sees you and is accepting of you and wants to engage too.
The word risk comes to mind because it is a huge risk for someone to step outside of their comfort zone and also away from their tribe of like believers to do this. So tell me a little bit about that, about negotiating those dynamics and enabling those folks to kind of keep stepping forward if they can, or is it the situation that enables them to step forward? They've been told you're another. We talk about the others all the time, and now you're stepping forward to talk to them, so I think in certain communities, that's a huge thing and a little bit of a risk as well, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what people have to face when deciding to enter into these spaces. What's interesting is you get them at different levels. So initially, everyone wants to share stories and share why is it that they believe so strongly about something, because they want to convert people. They want to bring people to their side, especially if they're passionate enough about what they're sharing. They're like, yes, this is my opportunity to go evangelize, to go bring people to my tribe.
I got it.
I believe in it so strongly. So this is a mission that I have. And as a matter of fact, several of my film participants, the pro-life and pro-choice participants who are also part of our workshops, often say that. They say, we joined this because we knew it would be an amazing opportunity to be able to convince people about what we believe, bring people to our camp. And what we ended up walking away with was the realization that we were the ones who needed convincing. We were the ones who needed transforming. We didn't need to bring anyone to our side. We needed to open our hearts up to be able to see each other for who we are. And that was the transformation for them. That was the impact for them. And now it comes from them, which is amazing, right? But that's what ends up happening. So you bring them from the, you want to share your story, right? Your story is powerful, important to you. And clearly I let them know, I would love to have you two listen to each other and see what happens. I wasn't telling them you must this, you must that, you're going to go out and, be best friends and exchange numbers and, hug and kiss for my cameras, like, but secretly, I hope that they would. So I devised kind of the multi-day, multi-step approach for them to be able to have the opportunity to come together. Because that's the thing. It's not that we don't want to come together. It's that we don't know where to start. Like the opportunity oftentimes doesn't present itself for us to be able to sit in conversation with someone who's different from us with curiosity, presence, and without ego and judgment. We don't know how to do it. The space is not available to us. So we disengage. And we stay in our silos and we stay in our echo chambers. And then the problem persists. The hatred grows, the fear grows, the othering, the this, the that. This is all we hear. This is the people who are closest to us are saying these things in our closest circles, at the dinner table, we hear it. How do we get out of it? Like, and who is at fault? Right? And we need to understand that like no one is at fault for lived experience. And yes, we don't want to normalize anything radical in any way or form, but when we have a little mercy for lived experience and where people come from and give them the opportunity to recognize and see others, that's how we get out of this. If we have absolutely no mercy and no belief that people are inherently good, that people ultimately want to get to know you, that people expand when they, hear about a different culture, a different ethnic background, a different language, a different lived experience, why you believe what you believe because of where you come from, and why that's deeply important to you. Even if it's not something that I agree with, I can say, that's interesting. I never heard a story like that before. And what that does is it allows me to see the other person not as this evil enemy. It's just a person with a different lived experience. Like, how can I blame them for that?
Yeah.
And it comes up. I mean, just last night I was giving a talk. It was a story-based kind of talk at an organization to bring the business groups together just to meet. And that was a question that came up at the end, what can we do? And use some of the same words you're using about curiosity, show up, stretch yourself to talk to somebody that's not like you. And it was interesting to see the reactions of, it takes effort and it takes listening. And we'll see what their response is as they're going forward, and if they create a space for a little bit more of that. But yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. And about now, when you're doing your sessions with people who have raised their hands to be part of this, are you doing it over a concentrated period of time, like a few days where they can't be parted, or you're doing it in segments over time? The conversations and the connections.
Yeah. So now our workshop is split into the screening of the film and then a two-part, 2-hour
Mhm.
series where we invite people to learn about listening, like what skills are required for you to engage, as
Mhm.
well as what listening blocks are withholding you from being able to listen. So acknowledging that we all have listening blocks and we all have work to do, and that there's like no shame to it because we're all in a journey to be better. And understanding that, then we can enter spaces where we are naturally sharing who we are and why we are who we are. And it's really just empowering to those who feel called to share from that place of, this is what matters to me, this is what shaped me. And then it's also really powerful for those who are in the room listening to that lived experience, and that invitation to, we all have stories. All of us have stories, whether it's on difficult topics like the topics the film covered, which were abortion, guns, and immigration, or whether it's who you are because of your socioeconomic standing or status when you were younger or now,
Hmm.
gender, your sexual orientation, your race, ethnicity, cultural background, right? We all have stories. When we dig deep enough, we all do. And what's great is we can all connect to moments where we were othered because of one of those identities. And we all have them. So it's actually a unifying moment for a lot of people where you're connecting to that feeling of othering and what that truly felt like. It doesn't feel good. So then it inspires you to truly want to be a better ally for that person or those people who have it really bad, because you tapped into the feeling and you want to be there for them and show up for them in a different way.
Right. And I would imagine well, I know this for a fact too, is that, on the other side as well, it's helpful because if I'm the person who is actively being excluded, and part of a marginalized population, whatever context it may be, um, and I hear from someone who's not part of that group and who's part of the privileged group, who is already included and feels a sense of belonging, but I hear about their story of being othered and being excluded, then it makes me feel like I can trust that they're a true ally. They're not just showing up out of the blue because it looks good to show up, or it's making them look good to show up. And I think that's the kind of thing we were talking about earlier, right? It's that sort of willingness to show your own vulnerability when you are part of the dominant group that's privileged and included, so that others who are excluded and don't have the same privileges, they can actually trust that yes, you are an ally, that I kind of agree with, right? That I've actually permitted you to be my ally, because I think that's such a big issue in the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion, where it feels like it's checking the box, and the leaders are the white middle-aged man leader. The majority of CEOs look like that, and are part of that demographic. It has felt for a long time like it's just a checking the box, and that's the spokesperson putting out the statement that yes, of course, we're allies of everyone and we want everyone to feel included. But it's very, very different when you hear a story from that person who's able to relate in a very different way, and in a way that actually connects with that sense of exclusion. Now I trust that person to say, okay, maybe you will do something about changing that because you've actually gone through this yourself, right? And I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's not much of a question there, but I couldn't agree more in terms of that idea that without hearing these stories of exclusion, it's almost impossible to come to any sort of meaningful action in terms of an inclusion campaign, right?
Yeah.
And that was going to be another question for you in the time that we've got left. around, what's happened since 2016 and, all the different issues that have come up and, the pandemic hit, the, a rather big social justice movement that we're still feeling the ripple effects of today. And hopefully that momentum is still there, but certainly since the George Floyd murder, police brutality, et cetera, companies, corporate America, started to pay attention in a more meaningful way, it felt like at the time, it's certainly in 2020, 2021. And I'm curious in terms of your work, how that's changed things, how your work has evolved in kind of response to what our society's been going through, where you started with this film and now there's all these issues. What's how do you feel about this? What's the finger on the pulse that you have in terms of that corporate response to diversity, equity, and inclusion? And is that something you've been involved with?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. So Listen Courageously was taken to 25 plus universities, organizations, and corporations, mainly under the umbrella of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Following also what we saw after the pandemic and, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, et cetera. And it was kind of a great opportunity for people to come together around a film that had nothing to do with kind of individual identity, but more to do with difficult conversations, but how walking people through, well, these people across these really politicized topics are able to have these conversations. Let's talk about the skills so that we can have conversations across things that are part of our identity. And some could argue, politics and all that is part of our identity as well, but it was identity in a different way, right? It was identity on the basis of gender, sexual orientation, race, et cetera. And so that's been just wonderful to create space for those conversations to happen, because those conversations were and are so very needed in our society. So when we go from uniting people across divides to uniting people across differences, I think that's why I did Listen to begin with, right? So the spirit behind that was always there. I did it as a Colombian American who was trying to find myself in our country. So for me, it was never about, oh, let's bridge this political divide, blue, red. It was, how can we connect as humans, right? Can we see each other? And that's what we do in the spaces that we create now, that, are still within workshop settings and are also within speakers series that we are now creating, where people are coming to share their stories of identity to expand perspectives to those in the audience and to those who get to watch them afterwards. So that's an initiative that we have going that I'm really excited about, because I have found the beauty of sharing story very much like you all have, right? Like, we know the power, but I hate it when the power of sharing stories stays within workshop settings, behind closed doors, in Zoom rooms. I just there's such a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because stories expand us. They simply do, because once we're able to see someone, we connect with them at an empathy level. We put our ego to the side, back to the ego, and we truly step. And I have this, reluctancy to say step into someone else's shoes, because I actually don't invite people to step into someone else's shoes, because no two people are the same.
Right.
So you cannot physically do that. Literally, you cannot do that. So the analogy itself doesn't work for me. So I actually invite people to take their shoes off and to enter these conversations just as a blank slate, with willingness and eagerness to just ask questions, be present, be curious. But it takes the taking away of the shoes. But what I was going at with the ego is that when we're able to put it aside and we're able to feel what the other person feels, still in our own shoes or without shoes, then we cannot harm them. We cannot.
Yeah.
I was curious because when you do a workshop or experience, the participants that come through it always give great feedback and direction about what could happen later on. What was some of the key feedback you received from the original participants that shaped your experience as you move forward? Or how you presented these gatherings?
I think people always want more.
Mhm.
I think when you're creating spaces for people to share things that are deep to them, and that are transformative to not only them, but others listening, people
Mhm.
want more. And I think the biggest obstacle has been, how do we entice corporations to want more, right? So that it's not a workshop with a two-part, but so that it's an ongoing process
Mhm.
of engagement, so that the listening that is happening is sustained over 6 months to a year, and not a month long or 2 week long engagement.
One and done. That's
Exactly,
it.
exactly. But this is the checking boxes, right? That I have seen, that you probably have seen,
Mhm.
a lot of people who to do this work see. So I think organizations also really have to recognize, what does it really take to do this work? Because it's not one and done. It's not a two-part series. It's a continuous process of, you opened up, you maybe earned the trust of your people who work with you, to not call them anything else, people who work with you. You were able to show yourself as that leader who not only attended the session, well, booked the session, perhaps attended the session, shared things, and perhaps also was able to acknowledge things. I had never heard a
Mhm.
story like that, or your story made me
Mhm.
feel that, or just giving people that time to show your humanity and your acknowledgement of their story. Like, you actually listened to them and you saw that.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
what happens after? They
Yeah.
connect with you and you connect with them. It's not difficult, right?
Yeah.
But it's this culture that we live in of, immediate rewards, what matters, what gives me money, what sells, but we're not stopping to actually think, what is it that improves my relationship to the people who work with me, so that we can all be happier, so that then improves our bottom line, so that we are inviting ideas that are different to the table.
Mhm.
Because this person who had never shared that she is Colombian American and this and that happened to her, can now talk about, how she wants to include something about her heritage that is important to her in the next launch of the product.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mm.
not to mention the illumination of certain audiences that a more traditional leadership that doesn't have such diversity may not have noticed, or may not have deemed important. That's a big part of our work too. Is just recently working on a health literacy project, with a creative agency, and seeing that some of the pushback they get from their clients who are in pharmaceuticals, et cetera, is saying, well, that population is not part of the marketing of this. And then the creative agency actually has to show through research that, well, actually they are, and that might be the main population, but it's just that, it's not part of the mainstream, and yet there is a market there. And that's
Yeah.
the thing. And once you see that, putting it into business terms, then people sort of change their tune, right? Which may sound cynical,
Mm.
but it also makes a lot of business sense, right? That the more points of view and perspectives you include, the more your markets are going to open, the more opportunities you're going to find, the more ideas you're going to get. And that's where innovation comes from, rather than just always hearing from the same group of people with the same ideas, because
Right.
they have the same
And I
background,
always
same
say,
perspectives. Yeah.
spend less time with lawyers too, with misunderstandings. That's always a goal. That's a cost saver. So
Right.
no offense to the lawyers out there, but we spend more time with them than doing things that actually could be much more productive and generate some positive environments.
Right.
But that's a
Yeah. Yeah.
longer view.
Yes, I'm aware of the time, and I feel like there should be a part 2 to this, because there's so much that there's so
Absolutely.
much we've covered, and so much more we could be talking about. We could be talking about all day, really. But there is one question that I'm wondering about, and that I have in my mind, which we ask of all of our guests, and I'd love to ask it to you, Juliana, if that's okay, is whether there's an experience that you could tell us about, an experience you've had that still shapes who you are today. It still kind of influences you.
Yeah. Well, eh, I think the most significant experience that shaped and influenced me was my family's move to the U.S. when I was 15. It's the biggest experience that changed my life trajectory, and also impacts what I do today. So coming from Colombia, a country that is very divided across many lines, but having witnessed very early on like a conflict that extended and still kind of lingers, but predominantly has been kind of tamed. But being in a place where peace and the prospect of peace and with a very salient conflict of a population that was and is still very split, always had me questioning ways in which we can come together, ways in which we can be a peaceful society. And then I moved to the US at 15, and having experienced also things that were shocking, like kidnappings of friends going to school and that kind of thing. And I come to the US and I'm like, okay, we're, no conflict here. That was 2000.
Surprise.
And then 9/11 happens. And I'm like, whoa, a lot of conflict here. So then, interestingly enough, I studied journalism at Northwestern, and then my second major was history, and my kind of minor within history was the Middle East and Africa, because it was a region that I really wanted to understand after 9/11. Because I'm like, how are we going to solve this conflict? Right? I'm here. How are we going to mediate this conflict? And then I ended up recognizing after the 2016 election that there was an internal conflict in the US that needed to be solved. So I went back to it. And that's why this kind of need to do something about this was so present, because it really has been present throughout my life in different circumstances and situations. And what's interesting is it's actually kind of gone full circle, because the work that I've done with Listen Courageously also allowed me to use the methodologies and go back to Colombia and invite Colombians to come together across social class divides.
Wow.
And in a new film called Indivisibles. So it really feels wonderful to be able to apply the work now to something that is very present in Colombia, that has Colombians divided and split and in suffering, because we don't understand each other. We don't see each other because we don't listen to each other. So we are in, polar opposites, set of people here, set of people here, and we are not creating intentional spaces for dialogue and for tapping into each other's humanity. And most importantly, for seeing what we can do when we connect empathetically to each other and begin to relate differently. Like, what change can that have in a society that has been divided? And unfortunately, where some have been excluded and continue to be excluded, and it's very easy to stay in our comfort. It's very easy to say, I'm good, why bother? But we need a reckoning as a society in Colombia as well, right? Like, ultimately, the getting out of the comfort zone and the digging deep to do something about it will get us at a better place. And it's not comfortable to do, but it's what we must do. Yeah. And it's the same in the US. It's like, why bother? Why? Oh, so scary. This person? No, forget it. But we need to do the hard work. It's only through that pain and that discomfort that we will reach comfort. And that's what people experience when they go through Listen Courageously. The film initially with the disagreement, it's painful to watch, but only when we go past the pain, we arrive at the relief. I was able to listen to that person. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look, I can see them. I can see them for something that I never thought they were.
Yeah.
Our pro-life lady says after going through all the encounters and she's been a part of our sessions, she's like, my husband was having a hard time recognizing me. He's like, who are you? Because they're both hardcore pro-lifers and she hasn't changed. She's still a hardcore pro-lifer. Listening doesn't entail or invite people to change who they are and what they advocate for. It changes you to see people with your heart so that you can connect with them differently and so that your perception of them is different. And maybe we can talk about, moving legislator together. But until we do that, we're not going to get at the legislative change. We're not.
Yeah. 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 I always like to ask our guests for a call to action at the end, and I think you've given it to us. and if I could just sort of paraphrase what you were saying or repeat it, this idea of doing the hard work, it takes courage, it takes a willingness to go into an uncomfortable place, but then that sigh of relief that you conveyed as the end of the story, it's interesting because these are the most satisfying stories that we consume in our everyday life, books, movies, everything, stories that people tell us. That is the structure. There's a conflict, there's something that's very uncomfortable, there's a struggle, and then at the end there's a sigh of relief, right? In the best case scenarios, right? And but that is inevitable in life, and I think it's the beauty of your work. It mirrors what life is, and yes, there's been a tendency in our society, it seems, certainly through all the conversations we've been having, Jules, we're seeing this time and time again, of a kind of fantasy that, if I stay over here in this group, it's all going to be okay. I don't have to listen to everybody else. I can just stay in my comfort zone over here. But it's when you move from that comfort zone into something that's uncomfortable and you come out the other side, that's where transformation happens, and that's where growth happens. It's human, that's how humans evolve, and it's always happened this way. And so I think this is a great call to action to ask our listeners to really think deeply about this and to notice in your life, and it doesn't have to be life-changing, as you just said, but notice those areas in your life where, where can you step out of your comfort zone and make those, look for that opportunity to grow. I think it's a great call to action. But having said that, that's mine for everyone, based on an interpretation from yours. But I'd love to know if there's, as a kind of a parting words, if you have any resources that you would want to indicate to people, or anything you would want to point people towards in terms of learning more about your work.
Thank you, Jerome. That was beautifully put. So I appreciate the summary. Yeah, it's interesting that we look for this and enjoy this in books, but that when it comes to us, we are so hesitant to do it ourselves. When truly what emerges at the other side is also this relief of, I am not carrying this burden.
Yeah.
I am less burdened because I've been able to see you for who you are. And that says so much about you as a person. So there's this quote that I use. It's actually something I said at the TED Talk that I gave, which is, if the humanity in me fails to recognize the humanity in you, then I fail to recognize the humanity in myself.
Correct.
So call to action, invitation, inspiration, so that if people don't want to do it for the other person that they are having a hard time understanding, that they do it for them. Because
Great.
they will earn, gain, see, love along the way. And just that recognition of like this liberation that happens when you try and when you succeed and when you see beyond the label that you had previously placed, it's just so freeing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree.
So listencourageously.org is where people can find us, in social or on social media at listen.courageously. And also the sister company to Listen Courageously that runs some of these experiences is called Story Powerhouse. And under Story Powerhouse, we'll be mediating some of the speaker series that I mentioned and coming up with other exciting things. So
Good. Keep it coming.
Yes. Fantastic. So we're gonna keep watching this space, and thank you so much for being on the podcast today and sharing these experiences. I think it's been it's really wonderful, and our listeners are really going to appreciate this one. So just as a few things to conclude this episode, we've just given you different ways to reach out to Juliana, which will also be included in our episode's notes. And if you have not subscribed yet, you can still do that and leave a review if you can on your favorite podcast platform, as that's what drives the word of mouth. Also want to let people know that we have a 3-part workshop series that's available on our website at narrative.com, NARATIV.com, where you can learn more about how you can find, craft, and tell a powerful story of your own in a safe and supportive environment over the course of 3 one-hour sessions online. And of course, there's many other resources. Our blog is another one, this particular podcast, if you want to go through other episodes. And as always, you can reach out to us. We're here to listen. If you or your company are interested in our services, and of course the services that we just heard about from Juliana Tafur, all of that is available on our website. So don't hesitate to reach out. We are ready to listen to you just as you have listened to us today. So thank you so much. Thanks again, Juliana. And thank you, Julienne. Just realized the connection between the two names right now.
Yes. It's great. It's the first
it.
time for me. This is great. And then also to everybody, listen, you're not going to melt, give it a chance.
That's right. Exactly.
And keep learning. We all are every day. So this session was a real gift. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bo. It was a real gift.
Thank you so much. All right. Goodbye, everybody, and see you next time.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.